very good morning to you. Welcome to the Morning Brief right here on Channels Television. I'm Jeffrey Uzama, and of course, it's good to be back, Bwala.
Yes,
I've missed
indeed.
the show.
So glad to have you back, Jeffrey.
I'm super excited to be back.
And of course, you put on some flesh on the cheeks.
And that you're going to draw out in the next few days.
Good to have you back. Welcome back,
much.
Jeffrey.
Thank you so much. What has been going on? What did I miss?
Well, you've missed quite a lot, Jeffrey.
Yeah.
I believe you've missed 2 petrol price increases. Your absence, we've experienced that.
I bought it at the filling station.
You bought it at the filling station. Yes, you've also missed the back and forth between the EFCC and, the allegations leveled against it by Very Dark Man in that audio that he released on Bobrisky's time in prison. And, of course, that has unfolded from the investigation by the House of Representatives Committee yesterday. What else have you missed? You've missed quite a lot. The president has since returned, but he went on leave. And at a point, the vice president was also absent, and that drew quite a number of reactions, of course, from the presidential candidate of the Labour Party, Mr. Peter Obi, who condemned that vacuum to a very large extent. Well, those are some of the things that you've missed.
I've been following up on what's been going on in the policy. Once a newsman, you're always a newsman, trying to catch up with whatever is going on, the back and forth. But one of the realities that hasn't left us is the fact that the economy is in a very bad shape. The president has been trying to say, seek understanding from the people and all of that, but I don't think that is cutting it as much as people want it to be. I listened to the radio on my way here, and you can see people still lamenting the cost of living is pretty high. And I saw all the back and forth between the issue of Bobrisky and all of that. As much as that is important, I don't think that's a priority to Nigerians right now. The people that are responsible to do their jobs should be held accountable. I know committees were set up. The House of Reps is on the issue as well, but I feel, for me, there are bigger fish to fry. The cost of living, inflation numbers are not looking good. Interest rate is high. The economy is not in the very best shape. The president himself has acknowledged that some of the things that I expect that should be coming in because of the policies of government hasn't been coming in yet. I even listened to the president's speech. I know this is going way back. And I know that there were some things that were said in those speeches that were not exactly...
Oh, the October 1 speech,
yeah,
right, Jeffrey?
They were not exactly true. At the end of the day, I'm sure that they also recognize those mistakes as well. But at the end of the day, for me, those of us that are journalists, we don't have the luxury of looking away. We have a responsibility, according to Section 22 of the Constitution, to always hold those in authority to account. Some people can choose to be positive-minded, to be optimistic. We're all optimistic, but our job is to make sure that these gentlemen and ladies who are in charge of the things that we elected them to be, aka our Commonwealth, are held responsible every other day. And that's what we're going to continue to do as much as possible. So even though I was not around, I was following up what was going on in the country. So what do we do today? There's a lot to catch up today.
Yes, we're back and better, by the way. Good morning and welcome. I am Bwala Koka. So, Jeffrey, what do we have?
I've forgotten that you didn't even mention your name, by the way.
Well, you missed the show and you had to do all of that recap. So go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, if you live in Nigeria, even if you're not on TV every other day, you have the reality staring you in the face every other day, especially the cost of fuel and all of the things we talk about. But one of the things we're going to be focusing on today is this back and forth between the state governors and the EFCC as to the establishment of the EFCC, whether it follows through the right process. They are looking for a way to say, look, the adoption of whatever international convention did not follow the right process, and they want it to be nullified. So I understand that the Supreme Court is going to be hearing that case today between the states, about 16 states. It was originally Kogi that brought the case, and now other states have joined in, and senior advocates of Nigeria, Olisa Bakoba, as well as Femi Falana, have joined in on this issue to weigh in on the matter. So we're going to look at it as part of our State of the Nation. The EFCC versus the state governors, the DSS versus SERAP. Maybe you won't touch on the state of the economy. One of the political watchers will be joining us on the program today. Indeed,
and it's a segment that you should look forward to. Speaking of which, we had the EFCC on the program yesterday, by the way, and he gave us an insight into, the masterminds of this suit that has since been attracting other states to join in. And he also said emphatically that we need the EFCC at this point in time to fight corruption effectively. But that's not all. We're also going to be touching on the economy. We'll follow up on the federal government's duty-free importation window, highlighting some reminders of what it is, what sector it affects, and how far with the implementation amid continuous upsurge in cost of living.
That will not be all. It's all about the state of the nation, but this time we're focusing on the minimum wage. Today on the program, we'll speak with the leadership of organized labor over the issue of implementation of minimum wage and why the delay in adoption by some states and even all other matters arising. What is going on with the issue of the minimum wage? The labor will speak for themselves right here on the program. Our job is to pose those questions to them as much as possible. But that will not be all. We'll be bringing you into the program. And one of the ways we do that is a community show, as we always mention, is to ensure that you are part of the program across our social media platform. But our social media of choice is X. So just go to #CTV Morning Brief. Catch up with us. Whatever the issue is that you're dealing with and you're talking about, come on. Bring it up for us, and we'll bring you up to speed as to what exactly is the response of the authority, and just amplify your voice generally, as well as our WhatsApp number. Bwala.
Yes, indeed. So after this time out, we'll begin with the top stories, after which, of course, we'll be reviewing your thoughts to some of these big stories. So stay with us. We'll be right back after this time out. Jeffrey, our figures and law man, is back.
By the way, I'm wondering where is Coyote? We forgot to say that bit. Well, just like I took the necessary rest for the year, Coyote has also proceeded to, take a bit of rest so that when he comes back, he's going to fire up as much as possible. So, hey, Coyote, we miss you. Today is his birthday, by the way. Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday, Coyote.
We miss you on the program. We'll be back after this time. I'll join us again for the top stories. Top on the brief this morning is the Nigerian Army dismissal of reports suggesting a leadership vacuum following the absence of the Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Tari Lagbaja, who is said to be on annual leave. The Army also debunks reports of the existence of an acting Army Chief, and also warning those calling for military takeover to desist from such calls. The clarification comes in a statement signed by the Director of Defense Information, Brigadier General Tuko Guzzo, after a viral video surfaced online where some persons were calling for a military takeover. It says the armed forces of Nigeria is professionally managed and all the service chiefs are performing their duties as stipulated by law, as Major General Abdulsalam Bagudu Ibrahim, the Chief of Policy and Plans, is providing routine brief to the Chief of Staff, the Chief of Army Staff, in accordance with the standard military procedure. That is coming from the Nigerian Army. Let's tell you that the Chief Justice of Nigeria, Justice Kudera Kekerekun, is asking judicial officers to embrace technology for more efficient and transparent legal system. Justice Kekerekun was speaking at the Second Regional Conference on Administration of Criminal Justice in Abuja. The CJN says the prolonged trials and delays in justice dispensation can be stopped through effective deployment of technology.
It is well established that many of the challenges plaguing our criminal justice system, such as prolonged pretrial detentions, inefficient case management, and delays in the dispensation of justice, can be mitigated through the judicious application of technological innovations.
Well, now, in the meantime, the Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice, Mr. Lateef Fagbemi, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, says the federal government has started the implementation of the 300% pay rise for judicial officers. He described the move as an important first step in the President Bwala Tinubu administration's resolve to strengthen the judiciary after the president had in August signed into law a bill seeking a 300% increase in salaries and allowances for judicial officers in Nigeria. Mr. Fagbemi said this at the 12th convocation ceremony of the Afe Babalola University in Ado-Ekiti, where he was conferred with an honorary doctorate degree in law. And something that is quite an interesting perspective by the Minister of the FCT, Nyesom Wike, alluding to the fact that the provision of housing for judges can insulate them from manipulation. According to him, the assurance of a house after retirement will insulate judges from manipulation, interferences, and exposure to certain temptation. He made the statement at the official flag-off ceremony of the design and construction of 40 judges' quarters in Katankwe districts in the nation's capital, Abuja. Let's move on to other stories now, where the Nigerian Immigration Service says it has arrested controversial cross-dresser Idris Okuneye, also known as Bobrisky, at the Seme border in Lagos. In a statement by the service, the social media influencer was said to have been arrested while trying to flee the country. It described Bobrisky as a person of interest over recent issues of public concern, who is undergoing interrogation and will be handed over to appropriate authorities for further action. Meanwhile, a presidential panel constituted to investigate bribery allegation against Bobrisky says he served his 6 months jail term in prison over Naira mutilation, but had access to electronic appliances, including refrigerator and television. And that's according to a member of the panel, Mr. Uju Agomo, stating that no evidence to the effect that they lived outside of the prison. Let's move on now to other stories on the international scene, where 91-year-old Cameroonian President Paul Biya is back in the country. He landed at the capital Yaoundé's International Airport after several weeks of the country amid rumors about his health, according to state broadcaster CRO TV. President Biya appeared on television after the presidential plane landed, shaking hands with officials next to his wife Chantal as a jubilant crowd waited to greet him. Supporters wearing outfits displaying his portrait chanted to the beat of a drum and lined the roads as his motorcade swiftly left the airport for the presidential palace, according to CRO TV, which dedicated a program for his return. Well, it's good to see that he's back, because there was speculation as to his health. In fact, some people were speculating that the Cameroonian leader had even died. Well, let's move on to sports news now, where the English FA has asked Gary O'Neill for his observation on his post-match comments about the refereeing of Wolves' 2-1 defeat to Manchester City on Sunday. O'Neill suggested the officials may have been impacted by a subconscious bias towards bigger clubs when reviewing John Stones' stoppage time winner with the VAR. The on-field decision was that Bernardo Silva was interfering in an offside position in front of Wolves goalkeeper Jose Sa when Stones headed the ball, which was overturned by the referee Chris Kavanagh after being advised by VAR to review his decision on the monitor. Well, those are the stories we've been tracking for you, say, in the last 24 hours and the earlier part of today on the program. And it's going to form part of our conversation for the program and perhaps the rest of the day. But Bwala joins me now as we take a look at some of the things you've been saying on social media of choice is X. And of course, you've been saying a couple of things, Bwala.
Yes, indeed. Quite a number of interesting things to catch up with this morning, Jeffrey, including Lagos State government arresting a celebrant, individuals, events planner, musician for obstructing traffic and constituting themselves as environmental nuisance. There's also an interesting one, Jeffrey, by the way, which is this report about the NDLEA discovering drugs in the house of a senator. And Nigerians are talking about that why is investigation not being carried out, and why is the name not being disclosed? But I think the name is out there somewhere, but in the headline, the name of the senator is not
Senator
captured.
Ashiru from, I think, Kwara, they mentioned the name already.
Yes, and of course, the implementation of the increase in salary for judicial officers has been implemented. But let's start with that report from Lagos State following the arrest of those who abused the state's laws with their celebrations. So Captain Data is the first user this morning, and Captain Data said the audacity of these people, lawlessness, has eaten deep into the fabric of our society. They were probably like, nothing will happen. This happens in other parts of the state. And at Tokumbo Wahab, that's calling out the State Commissioner for Environment, I believe. We need a platform to report all these lawlessness kudos, HC Sir. Yeah, that's from Captain Data.
I don't think this thing is even unique to Lagos. It's across the country.
Across the country.
We like to celebrate, but why would you obstruct? I don't know the full detail of the story, but at the end of the day, the government must do how they have to do. If you're obstructing traffic, you're using your own YOLO to obstruct somebody's movement at the end of the day. Tunde Akerele says, this is absurd. Creating public nuisance in the name of celebration, they should be made to face the full wrath of the law.
And Yellow Junior says, were they arrested because they didn't take permission from the local government? Are the local governments functional, by the way? And that's why I think that this is just as important as it is the list of our problems right now. But it goes to the heart of the lack of efficiency that we find in local governments. There's so many other areas of administration that the local government is lacking. Management of markets, management of parking spaces.
They now have autonomy now. So
well, let's see how that plays out.
Let's see how it plays out eventually at the end of the day. Yellow Junior says, were they arrested because they didn't take permission from the LG, or this is not permitted in Lagos Street at all? I have seen this road blockage many times with a letter of authorization from LG posted on board.
Yeah.
The Lagos State government would be in a better position to respond to some of them.
And this is from 36 Kiniu, I believe. And Kiniu is a Yoruba word for a particular animal. I don't want to name the wrong animal now, but as soon as it comes to mind, I would say it. And this one says, I want this to happen in Oshodi very soon. God bless you at Tokumbo Wahab. There should be zero tolerance in Lagos. I believe this is affecting quite a number of Lagosians, and that's why they're speaking up about it. And this goes to the heart of challenge of noise pollution, not just, with the obstruction of traffic, but, schools situated between in residential areas, churches in residential areas, mosques in residential areas, where people need their quiet, and they do not have it.
At the end of the day, the government has to step up through the local government. If they have to do what they have to do to celebrate, then they should obtain the right permit to do what they have so that they are protected by the authorities. Else, you will be breaking the law, at least as far as Lagos State is concerned. We understand that drugs were discovered in the residence of a senator who is accusing the NDLEA of corruption, and the NDLEA is fighting back, the back and forth between them. They are saying he's fighting back because some persons were found with drugs in his house. About 3 of them, they were arrested, they were prosecuted. I think they are in jail, and now he's saying they are corrupt. So these are the responses that are coming from you. Moba says, if drugs were found at the Lola Shiru residence, was he called in for questioning? Did the aides implicate the senator? Did the quantity of drugs show and indicate intention for distribution? Where was the report published? Good question.
Very good questions. And Mrs. Chidiogo also writes in saying, why is the senator not arrested? At NDLEA in Nigeria, you found drugs in someone's house and you didn't arrest him. And we know that the NDLEA, operates in a manner that is not tolerant towards any form of drug, substance abuse, even trafficking. So these are the questions. If the senator has accused the NDLEA officials of corruption and the NDLEA is now only just coming up with this, the question is why?
Mr. Femi, who is their spokesperson, will be in a better position to respond as to how they treated that issue. Ekun says, good work. No one, irrespective of political or social position, should be above the law. It is sad to know that these questionable characters, in your view, are you wanted to say are the legislators in our land, my guess.
But it's just an allegation. So
it's just an allegation,
we can't conclude. And Ibrahim Jonathan says, if the drugs were linked to the senator, why haven't you also prosecuted him? Why are you just telling Nigerians about this drug dealings now that he's smearing your agency's reputation?
Good question. So maybe when we have them one of those days, they'll be able to respond for themselves. But these are the questions Nigerians are asking. But that's not all. We also understand, of course, the Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice, Lateef Fagbemi, the senior advocate, was in Ado-Ekiti yesterday for that convocation ceremony. And he did mention that the 300% increase for judicial officers, because there has been clamor, take care of these people so that to reduce the temptation they have. We have some great people in the judicial system, and we also have some very terrible people that should never have found their way into the judicial system. And they are still there as we speak, causing havoc in that system. But so this is government trying to say, this is what we can do for you. Even though people are debating as to the intention. Whether his intention is right or wrong, the most important thing is that they are now earning better than they were earning before. We can now debate as to why government is focusing on the judiciary and all of that. But Dr. D says, while it's good to see improvement in judicial officers' salaries, many Nigerians are asking, what about other sectors? Teachers, health workers, security personnel, and civil servants also deserve fair compensation for their hard work. Equity across the board is essential if we want sustainable growth and a just society.
A Nigerian lens says that is good. Hopefully it will reduce corruption in judiciary. Let's see how it goes. Of course, it will be important to see how implementation is done and how this fast tracks the administration of justice in the country. What about, and I hope, by the way, that this 300% increase in salary percolates down to the support staff in the judiciary.
Judicial officers,
court bailiffs. Yes.
From the CJN, who is their head down to.
Indeed. So how does it, impact upon the work of the judiciary? There's so many cases. The judiciary is bedeviled by cases that haven't been attended to. And in fact, the CJN was speaking yesterday that the deployment of technology, should aid the facilitation of the judicial processes. So we expect to see the congestion of cases at the judiciary, such that we'll see that Nigerians get justice in their quest to seeking redress on the myriad of issues that these cases cover.
For me, I'm just excited that there's improved welfare, but a corrupt person is a corrupt person. If you like, give the person the street. They'll find a way. The penchant for corruption is there. But for some, it may be an incentive to say, at least we're taking care of you, do the right thing. And if everybody gets access to the judicial system like politicians get, I don't know how politicians do it, they get orders, ex parte, injunction, and all sorts like that. Yet, to even get your case in certain courts will take a very long time. And I don't think it's fair. That is not the kind of justice system I want to run.
Jeffrey, we should have even mentioned that we hope that it eliminates corruption, which is the big elephant in the room as far as the judiciary is concerned. And, not just among judicial officers, but also among support staff. You want to get your case, you want to file your case, you're being asked, to oil the wheel of progress, or is it justice, as the case may be now. So those are real issues in the judiciary as well.
Let's take Oluwafemi's thought. They said, but the corruption, common Nigerian who doesn't earn close to them is expected to chest the price of the goods in the market and hope for better days ahead, because government have a secret plan they are working on to make things cheaper and better, but they've immediately increased and implemented the salaries of some judicial officers or the judicial officers. I guess that's what you wanted to say. So so you see, that's some of the sentiment we get from Nigerians. Some Nigerians are welcoming the idea that it's great to see our judicial officers earn better, because some of these people, their salaries are nothing to write home about. We can go to the police and all of that, but some are also speculating to the fact that politicians are doing this because they want some, favors from that arm of government and all of that. So everybody has a right to say what they have to say, but we'll stay with whatever we have evidence as far as the law is concerned. But we hope that some of these measures, according to Nyesom Wike, he said it will eliminate, I've forgotten the word he used.
Political interference.
Manipulation, those are the words. Let's hope so. Let's see how it goes and see eventually, because with what we see in our judicial system, and I'm really hopeful that the CJ and Kekereko, she will do the best she can to sanitize some of the bad eggs, all these ex parte. You go to a judge, the judge clearly knows that I don't have jurisdiction over this case, so throwing it out, so striking it out, whatever the term the lawyers use, will still entertain the case and go around this smartly, and then it becomes beleaguered in the justice system.
A matter of forum shopping, perpetual ex parte or injunctions.
We've seen all kinds of things. I don't want to call it forum shopping, for instance, in the issue of River State. We've seen a trend in River State, for instance, that the battle between Nyesom Wike and Fubara, for instance, most of the cases that I heard in River State favors the governor. Most of the cases that I heard in Abuja favors the FCT minister. I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying that is the trend we're seeing.
That is the trend that we're seeing.
Those are the things that the judicial people and the CJN should look into and all of that. So you see somebody restrained here, unrestrained in another court, and restrained all within coordinated jurisdiction.
And even though the Federal High Court, has jurisdiction to entertain a case from any part of the country, and that is what the law says about, the constitution of the court, but when a matter has happened in a particular state, the state high court there is also competent, to handle such cases, so that we stop seeing trends of having cases, as you have said, emanating from the Federal High Court and is favoring a particular party in the suit, and that you can put 2 and 2 together about what exactly is happening. So those issues must be addressed significantly.
And guys, the reason why we're dwelling on this issue of the judiciary, because we've seen funny things happening in the country. We'll give you an example before we go to our first conversation, which has to do with the state of the nation. And it has to do with the judiciary, because today we expect the Supreme Court to hear that case between the EFCC, the state governors versus the EFCC as to the legality of how the EFCC was constituted. The state governors, our state government, I should say, are arguing that, look, I want to avoid going into the merits of the case, because that's left for the highest court in the land to decide. And we're going to discuss it with our guests. But they're arguing the fact that if you have to bring in, adopt a convention outside the country and bring it into Nigeria, you have to respect Section 12, subsection 1, 2, 3 of the Constitution that says it has to pass through all of the houses of assembly. On the other hand, the government may be arguing the fact that the National Assembly, which created the EFCC, for instance, was created based on provisions that allow them to make laws for the good governance of the state in Section 4, subsection 2 of the Constitution. And then even falling quoted Section 15 of the Constitution, subsection 5.
Senior Advocate Olisa Gbakoba, right?
They were disagreeing on certain things, but the whole argument is now, this is the first time, or this is one of the first times, ICPC has been tested, I think, but the EFCC is in this particular one to say, okay, if we have to adopt a convention or whatever you deduce this from into Nigeria, did you follow Section 12? Because if it's a treaty and you want to domesticate that treaty, then the houses of assembly have to be involved. So it's almost a challenge on the institution as to the survival of the EFCC, or just to make sure it is properly institutionalized at the end of the day. We don't know what the Supreme Court will decide. But if we go way back, we can remember how they started. The Paris Club and the London Club, when former President Olusegun Obasanjo was just trying to see how they can write off our debt and cancel. And they said, look, as an association, you don't belong to something action, something. I've forgotten the full name now. You need to belong to all of that. And then it's okay. So the EFCC was just put together just a few days. National Assembly passed it. And now the governors are contending that it can't be passed by a fiat, just like constitutional review. It has to go around.
And
so there's the legality, there's the morality, and there is also the politics involved.
And perhaps it's on the strength of that the Director of Public Affairs of the Commission said yesterday on our program that the EFCC is a creation of the National Assembly. And so in the eyes of the law, it is a legitimate organization. And so the challenge to it is nothing but, the governors who are jittery about the work of the EFCC in the fight against corruption, and that it's totally unacceptable at this time in the country where the EFCC is needed, to continue with its work in the fight against corruption. So we wait to see how
the Supreme Court will decide. So on one hand, he is saying the National Assembly. So what is the premise of his argument, which I'm sure they will argue in court, is Section 4(2) of the Constitution. Gives the National Assembly such powers, but based on the exclusive list and all of that. But the argument of the governors is based on Section 12, which says if you are adopting, because it's from, I remember the Financial Action Task Force that Nigeria didn't belong to, that they had to form the EFCC and all of these United Nations conventions and all of that, adopting it so that we can be in that Committee of Nations. So if you have to domesticate that, then it has to be through the National Assembly. And so we're not going to go into the merits of the case. That's entirely up to the courts to decide. But where I was going to with the issue of judiciary and the CJN in focus, because we're also going to talk about the economy. One of the things that is really hurting Nigerians right now is the economy. I want to discuss it with our guests. But while I was talking about the judiciary, it is because of the action of the judiciary that we have 2 emirs in Kano. Action of the judiciary, we have 2 deputy governors, although
2 state assemblies,
in Rivers State. So
And if you even talk about the EFCC and the legitimacy or otherwise of it, we have, you know, an equivalent of that government organization in Kano State, the Kano State Anti-Corruption Commission, which is also fighting corruption. So is that one of the things that will also be presented by the council arguing in favor of it?
I don't know. Let the lawyers do their work. The hearing is today, and afterward the Supreme Court will make a decision, and so we'll rest that case once and for all, and to become a precedent for our law, because it's also a court of policy as well. So we'll take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the state of the nation, from the EFCC to the DSS to the economy. We're going to just a potpourri of conversation, and you're going to enjoy it. Join us again. Welcome back. The very first conversation we'll be having has to do with the state of the nation, but in focus will be the issue of the courts and the relationship between our anti-graft agencies and the state government. So later today we expect to have a hearing at the Supreme Court, and it has to do with the EFCC being questioned of their establishment or existence as 16 state governments or 16 states. Led by Kogi State government, which was the original, they originated our suits and took them to the Supreme Court to say, look, even this EFCC, let's look at it again. It was not established according to the provision of the Constitution, citing sections like Section 12 of the Constitution. And the other states now decided to join in the case. So there are different layers to this conversation, from the legal angle to the moral angle to even the political angle. And that's why we have joining us on the program a lawyer and a governance expert as well. Mr. Daniel Bwala joins us from our Abuja studio. Mr. Bwala, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Great to see you again. We're going to walk around a couple of them, but let's begin with this issue of the EFCC without trying to be preemptive of the biggest court in the land and trying to, extrapolate what the merits of the case are and how the outcome will be. But at the end of the day, this is a case in our hand, and it's a big question as to how this will play out in court. But maybe I'll have just to have your first impression as to how we got here, that we're now seeing a situation. Because some people have said, look, it's good to challenge the process, no matter what it is. It's good to test the law and see how it plays out in court, especially the highest court in the land. What do you see as far as this particular case is concerned?
Right. Thank you for having me, and good morning to your viewers. Yes, you're right that the law is meant to be tested. And the law is developed, like those who have that knowledge of jurisprudence of law, they will tell you that the law is developed by testing the law. It is when you test the law that you get the flexibility of the law that reflects on the intention of the lawmakers. And in some cases where the intention is not very clear, you will see the clarity by virtue of judicial pronouncement. And at other times, even if the intention of the lawmaker is in a certain direction, but maybe there have been change of customs, traditions, and the changing time. So when the law is tested, judicial pronouncements sometimes can give a new dimension to the law in order to meet with the quoting age of event. So that's about it. But now with respect to the what is it called? The merit and demerit of the matter. I don't want to delve into it because the matter is already before our judicial heaven. Supreme Court is called judicial heaven because the decision of that court binds all authorities throughout the Federal Republic. But you rightly asked the question which takes us away from the talking about the merit or demerit, which has to do with how we come here. You see, the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission was created out of the police. And the police has the blessing of the law and the Constitution. And so there used to be a department in the police that deals with fraud. And that department, although has not been scrapped, but it is from that dimension that EFCC was created out of that police into an agency to operate specifically for specific function, which is economic and financial crimes. And so generally speaking, EFCC does not operate on its own and is not standing as though it is a self-created agency. It is an offshoot of the Nigerian police. And you must know that the Nigerian police is the mother of all law enforcement in the country. Even the Nigerian army came out of the police. If you remember the native authorities then. The Department of State Services came out of the police. ICPC came out of the police. All of them came out of the police. So EFCC can best be described as an offshoot of the police, enjoys the blessings of the law. The National Assembly, by virtue of the provision of Section 4, it says they have powers to make laws for good, for peace, order, and good government. Peace, order, and good government. So sometimes when the law is tested, especially with specific reference to the enactment of the National Assembly, it is to see whether the law that is made provides peace, whether it provides order, or whether it provides good government. This is the yardstick, the acid test for the legitimacy, legality of the powers of the lawmakers to make laws for the country. And so there is no limitation as to the law that the National Assembly can make, except if the Constitution provides that such a law or enactment is to be made by a body other than the National Assembly. But of course, you know that all laws of the Federation are to be enacted by the lawmaking arm of the government. So that's the foundation. Then the governors. You know that from the inception of EFCC, even though it has a wide jurisdiction and scope in terms of fighting financial crimes, but majority of the work that EFCC had embarked on or had been doing over the years are work that relates to the investigation of former governors. Investigation can also include an incumbent, but for the investigation plus prosecution of former governors. And this is where the EFCC has had a hurdle from 1999 till today. They have found convictions in almost all other cases without stress, but when it comes to the governors, there have always been one delay or the other, one frustration or the other. And it is still the extension of that fight between the governors and the EFCC that is leading to the unlawful, illegal, and mischievous plan to scrap the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission.
Well, interesting, Mr. Bwala, and that was where I was going to head to. The position of the EFCC, that this is particularly having to do with the fact that it is the hunted that has instituted this suit. But you've covered that already. But in challenging this position, Mr. Femi Falana has, caused us to begin to think about, the law being a breach of true federalism. That's the establishment of true federalism. But he said something quite instructive, that if the law establishing the EFCC is a breach of true federalism, then it is the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria itself that supports this breach of true federalism. And that should even cause us to reflect about other aspects of our laws. We could think about taxation, which some of the governors have challenged in recent past. We could even think about local government autonomy, which the federal government has had to by itself institute a case in court which saw a ruling in its favor. What are your reflections on this matter of federalism that is at the heart of the challenge to the EFCC's existence?
I do not think, quite frankly, with all honesty, that the functions and operations of EFCC has in any way invalidate or underestimate the powers of the federating unit to carry out functions or investigations and prosecution of individuals within the precincts of the state. It's a matter of interpretation and conflict of interest. Because, for example, in Kano, they have the anti-corruption body, which has been functioning optimally. And in Kano, you will see them functioning in specific areas that affect the economy of the state, Kano State. But you see, this idea that because Lagos State and few other states enact a law to fight corruption in their respective states, therefore, the functions of the EFCC conflict with that, in my view, needs to be looked at, right? Without prejudice to the judgment of the court that talks about the Lagos State as being different from the federal. You see, because if you look at America, which is where most of our adaptations come from, you have the feds, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI. You also have respective states that have their local policing and local fraud units and local anti-corruption bodies. But because of the specificity of the functions between the FBI and the local, there are certain crimes that have one concurrent jurisdiction between both the states and the feds, the FBI. So either the state can challenge and prosecute it, or the Federal Bureau of Investigation can as well do that. But in defining the scope and limitations of their powers, even if a state is undertaking prosecution of a case in the United States of America, the minute the FBI takes interest in that case, the FBI takes over the matter. And there has not been conflict in the US. That is the same thing that you find in Section 172 or 75 of the powers of the Attorney General to either institute, to take over, or to discontinue a case. That exercise of power has not prejudiced the interests of other bodies such as EFCC, police, or any other law enforcement within the federal government. So, for example, if EFCC is prosecuting a case in court, to which they have powers and jurisdiction to do that, Attorney General can come and take over that matter by just filing a plea to the court. Or he can take over and then discontinue the matter. An Attorney General's office can as well institute a case for which EFCC has jurisdiction to also institute. But where the scope, powers, and limitation comes from is that the minute the federal government takes interest over that case, the federal government takes over that case. And the rationale behind that is this. The states will hardly prosecute cases that affect the economy of the country. All federating units are components that put together that forms the state. Now, even though we practice federal system of government where there should be the powers of the state and the federation, if you look at Section 252 or 252, I can't remember at the moment, talks about the exclusive and concurrent jurisdiction. So if you make the case that EFCC prosecuting a matter relating to a state amounts to breaching the independence of that respective state. So what do you talk about concurrent powers as contained in the Constitution, where both the state and the federal government can as well be involved in it? There are procedures, there are items in the concurrent list, right? Concurrent legislative list that either the state or the federal government can be involved in it. So I think that people have given interpretation to suit probably their narrative or that the best they can think about. But there is no conflict, as it were, as to the existence of Economic and Financial Crimes Commission and EFCC taking over or instituting a case relating to either a governor or a commissioner. This thing that you are seeing trying to scrap EFCC, the governors don't want EFCC to interfere with them. The state will naturally not prosecute the governors because a governor going out brings out somebody to take over from him. The one who comes to take over can prosecute his master. And so the minute we do not get the spirit and the motive behind this drive to scrap EFCC, then we will know exactly what they are up and about. Majority of the anti-corruption in Nigeria, the financial crimes in Nigeria, are perpetrated by governors, the federating unit. I will give you a classic case, Bwala. The president came and there was increase of allocation to the state when we began with the removal of subsidy. Now, think about it. Only in palliative, states got 5 billion. Only in palliative. Now, with increased allocation, some states got nearly 100%. And these monies that have been coming to the state, apart from other interventions, have not been trickling down on the citizens of the state. The citizens are the citizens of the country. And if a governor is lucky to stay for 4 years or 8 years, he's likely to continue in that trajectory. By the time he finishes, the commonwealth of that state has been taken away. So they are saying if EFCC is not established, if EFCC is not functioning, then that means whatever the governor may have allegedly appropriated to himself, when he goes with that. Do we have a country? If you take away in fact, I am for the strengthening of the EFCC and increasing the scope of its powers. But the reason why this conversation is happening at the moment, Buki, I have to be very honest with you, is because lately the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission is becoming weak every day. So that's why you see, they say when an animal acts like it is weak, even the flies will try to test on your patience. That is what is happening. Where people escape from the pranks of EFCC, where thorough investigation is not done, where accusation of members of EFCC collecting bribe, appropriating. Look at the case of Bobrisky. It has not been dealt with by EFCC. All of these things give rise to people saying that if EFCC is not even functioning at all. So there is need for a reform in EFCC. And the reform to be carried out in EFCC should not be initiated by EFCC. It can be a reform by the Act of National Assembly, or the executive branch of government can engage the Attorney General to introduce a reform, because no doubt EFCC is getting weaker and weaker by the day. That's the reason why people are raising this conversation. So
there's also that you stated the political and moral angle, which I mentioned at the very beginning. But if we stay with the law, is there merit in their own argument as to, because it looks like what you're saying is, on one hand, there's the argument over jurisdiction. You're the federal government, the state government, we are a federating unit. So you should respect that dichotomy. On the other hand, there's also the argument of, if you have to adopt anything that is covering all of us as a federating unit, follow the law. So where do you stand on this one?
So, like I said, if you want to understand true federalism within the context of our 1999 Constitution and its functionality in our present-day realities, is to look at the exclusive list and to look at the concurrent list. So, for example, if a crime, a financial or economic crime, is committed by a governor or any citizen of the country in relation to matters that are within the exclusive list, the EFCC, without stress, will prosecute the matter, because the EFCC is an agency of the federal government which carries out the function of the federal government that are exclusively provided for in the exclusive list. Then there are matters also of economic crime that will engage an item or relate to an item that is in the concurrent. And items in the concurrent are items that state can do, federal government can do, they can do jointly. And in the given scenario, the state can prosecute, EFCC can prosecute. But in terms of knowing scope and limitation within the framework of the Constitution, is that the federating units are not above the federal government, right? And it is not a country of its own. Meaning that even our law, this present Constitution, as weak as it is, and with the judgment of the Supreme Court relating to scope and limitation of state and the federal government, is that the minute the federal government takes over interest of a matter that is in the concurrent, the state will have to back off. So, for example, if Borno State is prosecuting a case of economic or financial crimes, now, even if it is allocation that comes from the federal government to that state, you cannot say the money is from the state. It's not an IGR of the state. It's allocation from the federal government. Any crime that is perpetrated arising from that money gives jurisdiction to the EFCC to prosecute the matter. You cannot say because the state is a federating unit, therefore EFCC should not exercise its powers in prosecuting such an individual. And that is one case scenario. There are virtually 80 to 90% of what the state enjoys comes under concurrency. And these states are busy trying to stop the EFCC from looking into their affairs. Meanwhile, they are also busy trying to stop the federal government from implementing that true federalism they are talking about that relates to local government. So in the case of local government autonomy, they will challenge it and say that the federal government is a meddlesome interloper, interfering on matters between them and the local government. Then when it comes to the federal government, they say, leave us alone. So in other words, the attempt of the federative units in this country is to try to project itself as if it is an entity, a nation state within the framework of the nation state. So you see that this is not workable. And these things are not rocket science. Like I said, you can assess that, or you can judge that by looking at the provisions of the Constitution related to matters for which the federal government has exclusive jurisdiction or the federal government has concurrent. Even within the judicial framework, there are items, right, in the Constitution that the Supreme Court has original jurisdiction. It means that you can approach the Supreme Court straight as the court of first instance, first and final. Then there are matters that the Supreme Court has appellate jurisdiction. That means that to start somewhere and then it comes to them for final determination. Then there are matters that the Supreme Court can provide policy in respect of the matter. This is order. In the same way we have that order in the executive branch of government, we also have in the legislative branch of government, where the National Assembly can legislate on a matter, the State House of Assembly can legislate on a matter. And I give you another case scenario of conflict. Where there is a problem in a state relating to the State Assembly, why is it that the provision of the Constitution provide that the National Assembly can declare state of emergency? The National Assembly can go to that state and legislate on behalf of that state, pending when the conflicts will be resolved. So there is no conflict as to the power of the faiths over and above the federating unit. And why is it that many items for which ordinarily would have benefited the citizens of state, for which state government have not taken to heart to challenge the federal government? What they are challenging the federal government at the moment are matters of corruption and anti-corruption. See, the governors in Nigeria, they are making concerted effort to destroy this democracy. I have said when President Tinubu started, when these allocations started moving, when nobody was looking at the responsibility of the federating unit in administering governance, when all pressures were pushed and directed at President Tinubu, I said that we have taken our minds and attention from the fact that this allocation we are talking about, majority of this allocation goes to state, and the development is at the state level and local level, and nobody cares to look at governors and probe them on their affairs. Do you know today, any protest that is conducted, it is not directed at governors. They are the majority of what constitute our governors in the framework of today. Even the media houses, it is a challenge that all of us have to rise to it, Buki. Before I come back to you, you will see that because states, they have retainership with media houses in terms of advert and the rest, they make all effort to make sure that even in media houses, there is no concerted effort in bringing to light conversation around whether or not the governors are administering the resources that is going to them. If the governors are doing half, I'm not saying full, half, nobody will be pointing at the federal government. The federal government will focus on matters of exclusive.
There's so many lessons to this subject matter, and you have hit the nail on the head in your response to some of these questions. There's the matter of jurisdiction, as you've rightly pointed out. There's morality, and maybe even the multiplicity of functions, because this is not the first time that the legitimacy of the EFCC has been challenged. And if indeed, the EFCC is becoming weak, as you say, it is under this administration that it is happening, the APC government. And, we could go on and on. But maybe we should move on to another matter that is equally, affecting the polity. This time around, Mr. Bwala, is that matter between the DSS and SERAP. SERAP has written to the president and was very frontal, asking the president to stop using state security agencies, to weaponize opposition to dissent. And it's talked about its role in, challenging issues of national importance under past governments. But this is the first time that it is being intimidated. That's according to the statements that SERAP issued. It is surprising to note, Mr. Bwala, that the SERAP hasn't, it has stood by what it said before the DSS instituted that suit, that its offices was raided in Abuja Are you surprised by this development, Mr. Bwala, that SERAP is not saying that no, it's not going back on its claim that its offices were raided?
You know, where the veracity or otherwise of what SERAP is claiming will be determined by court by the time the Department of State Services states its case before the court as to whether it has been defamed or not. But you know that SERAP should know, unlike every other civil society, that there is a difference, just like the way SERAP do not want interference in the functionality of their objectives, that law enforcement also have laws that is established and govern their operation. EFCC, DSS, for example, is an intelligence agency that is created to detect and prevent crime within the state. And the prevention and detection of crime, they carry it out through various capacities that they have, which includes intelligence collection. It includes operations that they needed to carry out to stop crime. So therefore, I lay this background to say that DSS has a right in the day or in the night to invade any place in the country if the intelligence they gather suggests that they needed to act swiftly. But the good thing about democracy within our constitutional framework is that the exercise of that power can always be checked by the law court, not by inciting the public. You see, because SERAP, if it felt that DSS intimidated it, the Constitution provides that if you feel that your right is violated, is about to be violated, or you think it's about to be violated, you can approach the court and seek for the enforcement. SERAP ordinarily would have approached the court and seek for the enforcement of their right. But SERAP is coming out to the public in order to incite the public against the DSS. That is where they got it wrong. They are not applying what the Constitution provided about the exercise of their right. So the Constitution provides for a way by means the executive powers can always be checked. And if DSS acted illegally, unlawfully, or outside the bounds of its jurisdiction, that SERAP can get from the court a judgment against the DSS. In this country, Buki, there have been judgments obtained by Nigerian citizens against law enforcement, against government at the state or federal level with large sums of money. That is democracy. But if you look at the checkered history of SERAP, and I'm saying that because there are other media and civil society organizations that develop and demonstrate that. The fact that you're a civil society does not mean you have unlimited scope, including that of undermining the security of the state. Now, SERAP has filed so many suits in the last probably 10 years, I can't remember specifically, throughout the government of President Buhari. SERAP is always the one in court. How many cases have they won? How many cases have the court said that it's frivolous that SERAP has done? The fact that you're a civil society does not mean everything you do is right. And let me tell you another dimension that makes us, and especially even the Department of Services, to look at the functions and operations of some of this civil society and look at it critically. There is this thing called national security interest. Most of this, and I'm not saying maybe it has to do with SERAP, most of these non-governmental organizations are funded outside of Nigeria. Some of them don't even know who are their original funders. They only know the middlemen between them. So I give you an example. Any body or name in the United States or United Kingdom can be said to be financing a non-governmental organization in order to push human rights. But you don't know who is financing the people financing you. And sometimes that is an objective they carry out. This is how all over the world there are foreign interference in the affairs of the state. Now, we the masses may look at it from the face value, but DSS power is to look between the lines, to look beyond you, and to see whether or not somebody is behind you trying to undermine the state. But the powers of the...
Oh dear. Oh dear.
Interesting conversation there.
I wanted to follow up on some of the things. Is, you know, because it's the case, when cases are in court and subject of adjudication, try to be careful around what we comment on. Mr. Bwala, I understand you, but maybe you land on your thought, because I have a follow-up question for you. For a moment, we had a connection.
Right. So
yeah.
Okay. So I was saying that, like in America, they have what they call FISA, Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, and they have the FISA Code. The establishment of the court is to test the exercise of powers of the FBI and other intelligence organizations in the U.S. so that if they exercise their powers arbitrarily in tapping your information or breaching your privacy as a U.S. citizen, the court can always exercise its powers against them. I'm saying that to bring to home the notion that if you think that there are executive powers, whether police or DSS, there is a court to check the power and there is a court to award damages against them. But you cannot go against the law enforcement and say they can't perform their duties.
Mr. Bwala, for the benefit of our audience, because I'm careful around the case, because it's still is subject of adjudication. I don't know whether it's been heard. For the benefit of our audience, it's an argument between SERAP and the DSS, and it's neither here nor there. Why do I say that? It's your word against mine. DSS had claimed, from what I read, that they went to more like a familiarization visit to maybe new establishment within the city. That's what they said they went for. Not like invading the place. That's their own claim on one hand. And they went to that office. I'm saying this for the benefit of our audience who are not familiar with the story, so that you can also help us contextualize it as much as possible. They went there. They have a routine of establishment coming. As you said, they have a levels of power. So they call it maybe relationship with the leadership of that establishment. And they went to SERAP. And they said they didn't see anyone. I think they saw a certain person. The person said, look, nobody's in the office. If you have to come, you should have written to us, or at least write to us that you're coming so that we know you are coming. That was the argument. And then they said, okay, no problem. They left. That's the DSS claim. They left. And they found out that the SERAP, according to them, had posted on social media that their offices were invaded. So I want you to look at the picture I just painted here without trying to be the court. Shouldn't the DSS have written to SERAP to say, look, we just want to come and familiarize? Because at the end of the day, we wouldn't have gotten to where we are now, because there are claims as a fact that because of this crisis or imbroglio, at the end of the day, the reputation of our personnel is called to question, and by extension, the reputation of the DSS, which is the core of the argument.
Yeah, so if you look at the fact pattern, you will see that one, there is no violation of the human right in the sense of saying anybody in SERAP or at SERAP office was either manhandled, was abused verbally, or was intimidated. Now, DSS by law can come to your house whether by writing or by calling you or without any of these two invitations, because the law establishing them empowers them to carry out this act for the purposes of detection.
Mr. Bwala, my apologies. My apologies, Mr. Bwala. My apologies. I'm not trying to be ahead of the court. I just wanted to tell the story so you can help us. They say it's a familiarization. If you're going for a familiarization, shouldn't you have written?
I want to stand by what I said. I have not delved on the merit of the case in court. I have not mentioned anything relating to the suit. I am telling you what the law established to support DSS asks them to do or empowers them to do. And I'm also telling you what you will do as a person that will amount to violation of somebody's fundamental right. DSS does not have to write you, does not have to call you. They can just appear in your... Take, for example, if there is an exhibit that is a crime that they have, based on their intelligence and investigation, discover, and the minute they write you, you will move the exhibit away from there. The minute they call you, you will probably move the exhibit. I'm not saying it exists, but I'm just giving you one of the reasons why they may not have to do all this conventional prelude. They can just appear in front of your house. What is important in the eyes of the law is, when you finally appear in my house and I open the door and you say you want to familiarize, what is your conduct at that time? Can your conduct be interpreted as intimidating? Because the word intimidation, you can't just open your mouth and say intimidation and you think that because you say intimidation, it amounted to intimidation. Then where SERAP got it wrong, like I said, is that if somebody comes to you and you think that the person intimidated you, the law says you are to approach the court. You are not to incite the public. The tweeting of that is to incite the public against the Department of State Services. Now, if Department of State Services feels that we came, you didn't tell us you were annoyed, We asked for individuals, you told us they are not around, but you will notify them. And you didn't give any signs that you feel by knocking at your door amounted to intimidation. The next thing I see, you put it on tweet in order to move public perception against me, and it has defamed me. If I feel so, I have the right to go to court. In fact, in this case, let me tell you, Mr. Geoffrey, DSS is the one that acted more professional than Serap. Why? Because DSS could have just gone to their office and say, why did you tweet this? Come and explain. But the leadership of DSS now is doing what ought to be done, which is that even DSS is not too powerful or too much not to approach the court if it feels that its right is violated, rather than going there to bully people. So there is even a new order that supports constitutional democracy and free speech within the framework of the law that is being carried out by DSS by approaching the court.
Oh dear. So that's why they say technology sometimes is not a silver bullet. I just wanted Mr. Bwala to, would have loved him to land on his thought, but apparently technology is not allowing that for a moment. But if we, okay, Mr. Bwala, just land on your thoughts. Just again, we had that issue. We have just about 1 minute. If you can wrap up.
For example, this technology that has taken me off, for which you have not heard what I said, does it amount to intimidation of my person? Does it amount to violation of my right to reply to your question? It is technology. So I need to look at it from that point of view and say, oh, this point I'm making is very strong, but unfortunately technology, intervene. DSS by law can write you, can call you on phone, can also appear with anything that they do. You can always approach the court and determine whether they did it with ill motive, they did it with intention to defame you or intimidate you, or they did it based on intelligence. I am saying that the current leadership of DSS is doing the right thing.
Okay, Mr. Daniel Bwala, almost thank you. Well, technology did it again, but I'm not going to take it up, or you shouldn't take it up against me at the end of the day. But almost thank you for your perspective. I wanted to talk to you about the economy, but we understand we don't have much time anymore. Mr. Daniel Bwala is a lawyer as well as a governance policy analyst. I also call him the friend of President Bola Tinubu. Thank you so much, sir. If you can hear me, thank you so much for coming on the program. We appreciate it. Well, we will take a quick break. After this, we'll bring that conversation about the federal government has said it will, bring to zero import duty on certain goods for the cause of the crunch in the economy, the level of hardship people are facing, and some of these things are imported. But how far has that been? What's the level of implementation? Why do we still have things as expensive as they are? Those are the questions we'll be putting to our guests. Join us again.
Welcome back. And so from politics and other issues affecting the state of the nation, we'll turn our attention to the economy with specific focus on the federal government's promised duty-free importation window, 180 days, which was announced in July. And it was supposed to commence, in fact, in July. Of course, we know that a letter was issued to that effect for the commencement in the month of August. So if indeed it has commenced, how has it impacted on the price of foodstuff? And there was a list of foods, items that this duty-free importation window was supposed to affect. So joining us to have this conversation this morning, we have an economist, Mr. Adegboyega Adebaju. He's also a structured finance advisor. He joins us via Zoom from Abuja. Good morning and welcome, Mr. Adebaju. We'll also be having later on Chief Ernest Elochukwu. He's the CEO, Nestello Group, Freight Forwarders and Customs Brokers. He's also the former National President, Association of Nigerian Licensed Custom Agents. He's also going to be joining us virtually. But let's start with Mr. Adebaju. It was supposed to have kicked off, and there was a circular issued to that effect. That's the duty-free importation window. So perhaps we can assume that it kicked off. But if indeed it kicked off, we're yet to see a reduction in the price of food items that it was supposed to affect. Rice, for instance, is about 85,000 naira per bag. And some people are quoting that it is much higher depending on where you're purchasing it from. There's also maize. We're also still seeing, high prices in that area. So perhaps the question would be, is this duty-free importation window, is it effective or not? Or is it even in place?
Hey, thanks. The key thing here, first of all, is can it be effective? We need to bear in mind that it was supposed to be a short-term, quick stop measure. It was never intended to be long-term. But what we've experienced is not untypical of a situation where you have a policy announcement and then there's no infrastructure to carry that policy out in terms of implementation, effective implementation, I would say. One thing is there are laws and there are parameters around which the government agencies involved will typically operate. These perhaps had not been thought through or taken care of before the announcement was made. And like you just said, there was a gap up till August before the letter was issued. But I guess, again, we have a situation where the agencies that ought to see that this policy is properly implemented were not quite ready for it. And it goes back to having to think through decisions before they're announced. There are economic constraints here. Okay, so if you're importing, you're going to require foreign exchange. Okay, and therefore there's going to be a significant demand for dollars. And the key thing is, who are the people to import? What sort of qualifications will there be in determining who imports? Clearly, there are already people importing rice, there are people importing maize, there are people importing most of the food items already listed, but they do so for a profit. And the thing is, they have capacity to import. So perhaps it would have been much more ideal to be able to achieve economies of scale. Because if I decide as a small importer and I tell myself, okay, I want to step into this and I want to get a license, and I use the word license reservedly because I'm not sure that is what the document to qualify me is. And I do so, I cannot achieve the economies of scale of the same person who's going to bring in practically a shipload. Because if you don't, you will not be able to bring in the bags at such a low price that the zero duty would enable you sell at a low price to the market. And so beyond economic constraints, we also have infrastructure constraints. If we have a deluge of food imports coming through the ports, how many ships can the port facilities handle? Transportation to other parts of the country, storage, warehousing, and these food items are prone to insects and deterioration. So it's a very difficult thing to implement, and it ought to have been thought through. And I use the word difficult, consciously, because once you plan and you have the right people in place to implement, then that difficulty can be overcome. And of course, you also need to think about the sources where you're importing from, because there are health concerns. What quality of rice is being imported? I mean, you don't want someone to step out there who doesn't know where to import rice and ends up importing rice that has been stored in a warehouse for such a long time. So that's the key thing. And I guess the government realizes now that who are the people eligible to bring in this? The government doesn't need to be the one to import. They need to find the right people. And that hadn't been done. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a kind of a deluge of people who want to take part in this process, perhaps for profit reasons. But yes, it will be quite a constraint to government to be able to determine who is eligible, who's not eligible, who can actually be allocated foreign exchange, get the right quality and quantity of rice, bring it into the country, and ensure distribution to the points where the people who need them can buy them at the affordable rates. Thanks.
Okay, Mr. Adebayo, so that in case we missed it, I just needed to be clear on a few things before I do some follow-up. I know that an announcement was made in July. In August, we saw some statements in terms of guidelines as to who, what, and all of that, and the categories that are involved in August. And this is October coming to an end. For those people who may have missed what you said, are you saying this whole thing has not started?
I am not aware it has started, and that's true, because if it had, you would, of course, first of all, get a sense of the packaging in the market, because it shouldn't be mixed with those food items for which duty has been paid. And I'm yet to come across it. I'm yet to come across anyone who has. Fortunately, I have, in the past couple of months, been opportune to go around some parts of the country in the north, north central, and in the southwest, and I am yet to come across anyone amongst those who I engage with, including rice traders, that they have seen any of these zero duty import items.
So beyond...
I'm sorry, Bwala. It's really unfortunate to hear this, because this is, as I mentioned, this is October. We have barely 2 months, because it's supposed to be, as you rightly said, it's just a short-term measure to support the economy. It's supposed to end in December. So, and I know that certain conditions were put in place. I want to look at some. Said the minister has said that for importers applying for the duty waiver must have milling capacity and a verifiable backward integration program. Those were some of the exact words he used in perhaps the condition for those that will be beneficiaries of some of these things. Who was supposed to do the due diligence in the first place, and who is failing here? Because we must identify who is failing. And the reason I say this is that Nigerians are very upset. Things are terribly bad in the economy. And when we heard this, it's one of the things that people praise and say, let's see how much it will move the needle. But at least it's a good step that for about 6 months, zero duty on some of these things that are mentioned, rice, grain, sorghum, millet, maize, brown rice, by the way, Hawks brown rice, and all of that. And then this is 3 months down the line. We're not seeing anything. So who should we hold responsible here?
Yeah, but let me take a rather awkward position on this. There's no doubt about it that everyone liked the policy. It sounded good to the ears. Okay. Now, if this policy is not implemented properly, you are going to have a lot of fingers pointing at government, shouting about the failure. We'll probably be here today talking about how such a good thing was messed up. And from a personal perspective, I would rather that proper time is taken to carry out this policy than to start it in a hurry and get the wrong people involved. It's a chain. It's a supply chain, and you need to have the right people. Now, again, from a personal perspective, I do not totally agree with all the qualifications in there, but I am not in the minds of the policymakers. And I'll share this. I've spoken with someone up north who mills rice, who grows rice, okay? And he's not interested. And so you've got to look at that again. Someone who's got a rice business, wouldn't he feel that zero duty import is going to affect his own business? So we need to be careful whenever there are short-term measures that may end up having long-term negative implications and how it will affect businesses. Again, I say what I said in the beginning. It probably came out of a very good intention to drop prices in the market, but the entire chain may not have been thought through in terms of implementation, in terms of infrastructure available to implement anything, the agencies concerned and how they will deal with it. And so we are still at a planning stage for this. And that is the reality of it. I wouldn't want to point fingers at the federal government yet. And both of us know that we would rather, okay, be certain of what we're doing and do it effectively than to start such a policy. And the next thing you know, if you recall the COVID period, the lockdown period, where we started discovering warehouses with bags that were marked for COVID and they were kept away, they weren't sold, there would always be profiteers, people waiting to take advantage of anything. And if what has delayed this is to make sure that profiteers do not get a role in all this, then that's absolutely fine. But the thing is, and I think that's more important, is the government actually working towards making this policy work to implement it? It's a 180-day period. Whenever it starts, the 180 days starts counting. Okay, and I do hope they're able to do that before December, because the demand for those items tends to be high at that time.
All right. Beyond the challenges and the inability of the ministry to interpret its policy, the more important question is who was supposed to do what to ensure that this was implemented. That's if it has not been implemented. But of course, you have said that from what we're seeing in the market, there's no sense that this duty-free importation window is happening. But let's get a sense of what is happening in the importation space from someone who should know. And Chief Ernest Elochukwu joins us. He's the CEO, Nestello Group, Freight Forwarders and Customs Brokers. He's also former president, Association of Nigerian Licensed Custom Agents. Thank you for joining us, Chief Elochukwu. And we've been talking with Mr. Adebajo, who is an economist, and he says emphatically that there's no sense that this is happening. But from where you stand, Mr. Elochukwu, there was that circular issued in August that the implementation was to commence, August the 4th to be precise. Was there a list of qualified importers to back it up, to back that circular up, that, okay, these are the verified list backed by the federal government to enjoy this duty-free importation window?
Well, thank you very much for having me. First, I didn't hear a word of what the economist said, so I don't even know how to collaborate or relate to what he has said. I think it's all about technology, and well, there's nobody to blame for it. The technology is like the unknown soldier. However, from the point of view of custom broker and freight forwarder, I have not seen anything that is remotely related to an importation under the duty-free window. My take is that the government just made the expression of an intention. In other words, something that will be heard by the masses, and they're happy about it. But then the nitty-gritty of what needs to be done to implement it was not put in place. So even when it was announced in July, and then by August, we are now seeing a circular which has not been widely published. However, at the end of the day, I think that the right thing should have been to work out all this nitty-gritty, including who will be qualified and the procedures to get it to start off before making the announcement. Again, there is something about our system that is very awkward. We have the need to respond to the high prices of foodstuff. And so, for me, I think the right thing should have been, this intervention should last within so time, because whatever that is being imported is to intervene on the almost a situation that is getting out of hand. And we don't have to start putting conditions on it. That is my own view. And I think that, the government knows better because they are seeing everything. But then, from experience, I think this has been the wrong approach.
But Chief Elochukwu, if I may quickly follow up, the Association of Licensed Custom Agents are the ones, predominantly that stand to benefit from this duty-free importation window. So if there had been a lull in the process prior to the issuance of the circular in August, or even after August, did the association make overtures to the Ministry of Finance to sort of see that the implementation gets off? Was there any effort made by the association to ensure that this happens?
Well, Bwala, I think I may have to correct something. When you say to benefit, I don't know what we are benefiting as a group. When goods are imported, we make sure that it gets out of the port and gets to the final destination. And we were not consulted to start with, that to the best of my knowledge. And this is also part of the problem we have, that when a policy is to be done, the critical stakeholders are not involved. It is like an announcement is made, we hear it like every other person, where we should have put in our our little contribution on how it will be done well. There wouldn't be any such opportunity. So when we hear things, we wait like every other person, because we are not involved in the planning as well as the implementation. I am talking as not just a freshwater, but as a Nigerian, that we have situation that has gotten out of control. In fact, recounting it is always just to increase the trauma, that rice has gone beyond what is approved as the national minimum wage. I mean, a bag of rice. And that's about every other thing. So when we are talking about this, we are talking about how would this situation be made better. First and foremost, the idea of giving conditions of who will be qualified, who must have what in order to do this, it's a distraction to that intention. The intention, if my understanding is not too simplistic, is to get food into the Nigerian market so that the prices will reduce. So giving condition, and then, of course, when you talk about registration, you are not talking about how to put up with pressing. You know, who is going to register, who is going to apply, and all that. And we are talking about a situation that has become an emergency.
Let's take it back to Mr. Adebayo. Mr. Adebayo, let's begin to look at solution, because if indeed, taking your words, yours on this particular issue, we're going to reach out to the authorities as to this particular issue, because it would be sad if this was for the optics. I'm not saying it's for the optics, but we'll prove further. At least the authorities should be able to come and respond as to what is going on with this zero import policy, duty policy that was put together by the federal government that was supposed to have started being implemented. But being ahead, you have mentioned that some things were already wrong. What should be done to make sure that, because Mr. Alechukwu is saying that, look, it's an emergency. There's a level of urgency that some of these bottlenecks you put in terms of condition, just throw it out of the window. Let's just get food and flood the market as much as possible. Do you agree? Or it will also cause some crisis in its own? Or what exactly are the measures, in your expert view, that should be put in place beyond what they've listed by the federal government?
Okay, so no, I do not agree with just flooding the markets with imported items. It will be so unstructured, it will be chaotic, and it will give so much room for profiteering. And of course, those people who are supposed to benefit will never, ever get the benefits. So what do we need to do now? What's the solution? I feel it's about time. First of all, which ministry leads the implementation of this policy? Is it the Federal Ministry of Finance, or is it the Federal Ministry of Agriculture? I am aware that the Ministry of Agriculture was responsible for putting the eligibility criteria together. And therefore, I see a degree to which they are leading the implementation of this policy. But you and I also know quite well that you can't do this without involving the customs, because they have a role to check and certify that what comes into the country meets the criteria, along with inspection agents. And yet this agency of the government does not report to agriculture. So we've got a bureaucratic, jumble out there in trying to implement this. And the key thing is there some sort of ministerial steering committee, or a, interministerial implementation committee that has been put in place. I'm not aware of this. I haven't come across it. And so therefore, I think one way to go is to start to pick persons directly at a high level within the agencies that are responsible for implementing this policy, to put them together, and probably along with some persons from the private sector who are pretty good with project management, because there is a logistics part to this. Like I said, it's a supply chain problem, and it has to be viewed from that perspective. The source, the process of shipping it to Nigeria, the process of clearing it from the ports, and the process of distributing it. Of course, whoever is importing already knows what part of the country whatever is imported is going to. Nigeria is a very, very large land mass to cover in terms of distribution, and there are so many risks within that process that need to be dealt with. So you need that coordination in planning. Some people need to sit down, bear the responsibility, put together a plan, get all the approvals higher up that need to be to implement the plan, and then go for it. Go for it. That is the way to do it. I'm not aware that that's been done yet.
Apparently, there's a huge logistical implication to it, and there's a need for the ministry to articulate it from start to finish, according to what you have said. But as we custom now gradually, since we're talking about importation, let me come to you, Chief Elochukwu. Give us a sense of what is happening, particularly with import tariff on vehicles and other electric appliances. We understand that the high import tariff has seen major household appliances now being beyond the reach of even the average Nigerian, and that there are reports to the effect that importers are abandoning importation of vehicles, and Nigerians are now buying Nigeria-used vehicles. But give us a sense of what of how this is playing out, and particularly how it is affecting members of your association.
Like I said earlier on, members of my association are Nigerians. And by the way, I have not had one word of what the economist said. So, and this is supposed to be an interactive session. I thought that when I hear what he said, it will help me to either collaborate or to probably give my own perspective on certain things. However, I think this is the issue of technology, the Nigerian way. However, back to the issue, the high custom tariff has always been a major thing in our country's economic equation. For instance, there is this idea that when the common economic tariff, CET, for ECOWAS was being figured out, that Nigeria opted for so many exemptions. In other words, they wanted to collect the maximum in most of the areas, while the other countries of the community were going the moderate or even the minimal way. What it resulted was that some of the goods that eventually end up in Nigeria were now going to the ports of these other countries. It's a simple economics that people will go to where things are much better for them. But this might be a story for another day. But what I'm trying to say is that even not only the custom tariff now, but the exchange rate on its own is making things prohibitive. And these are big problems that need to be tackled. They are problems, they are huge problems, potential problems that will maybe escalate to something else. Because when the people have no way of having to afford the basics, it will reflect on certain things that they do. And I think this should call for concern, because when we look at what is going on right now, especially with it's like in this case now, this case of this food importation zero duty thing, it looks to me that there is a tug between having to forgo the amount of money that will be realized on and doing the thing that will help the people. That's the way I look at it. So that's kind of tug.
Mr. Alochukwu, if I may button, before I take it to Mr. Adebayo, as we begin to wind down, just a quick one. Maybe you can give us, for context, the moderate saloon car, not just luxury car, how much does it take to, how much duty do you pay?
I may not have the exact amount right now, but then at the end of the day, what we call the modern, I mean the usual, the small cars like Corolla, by the time it's finished, it costs as much as close to 5 million to clear. And so that's why you'll be finding that, about 2 million or something. These are something that used to cost much, much less. And then you now find that in the market that a Toyota Corolla, that is the Tokumbo, will be selling for between 5 and 7 million. So it gives you an idea, but I don't have the data right now, because this is something I need to look at.
This is extremely shocking. I understand, because I know that the specific car you're mentioning, some of them, as maybe 2020, maybe 4 years ago, less than 2.5 million naira can buy you those cars, that particular model. Let me come to you, Mr. Adebayo, on this particular one, because sometimes people often wonder why our duties are so high. So the politics of it sometimes, or the trade war part of it, is the fact that sometimes when you raise duty as high as you want, is because maybe you have some local production that is meeting up demand, so you want to backward integrate and discourage importation. But it appears that when it comes to ours, you really can't explain why our duties are so high. Is there an explanation from where you sit?
That's a somewhat... I'll need a crystal ball to be able to look into to get that right. But yes, you're absolutely right. Sometimes you want to discourage certain imports. But the other side of it is, I think historically, the government has used duties to raise revenue. And whenever there is an item for which demand is significant, it tends to attract attention. And once it starts to attract that attention, it attracts a higher duty. And so that's what we have in the case of cars, in particular, that much I'm aware of. But this goes all the way to every other type of item that is in predominantly high demand in Nigeria. I think which is also the reason why we keep saying that as a country, we need to start thinking in terms of what we export rather than just importing all the time. You can take away the tariffs on importation, and government will continue to always look at those tariffs and see them as an opportunity to enhance whatever income it is they want to make or which they can make.
So at the end of the day, just staying on that particular question as a follow-up, I mentioned the issue of backward integration, when sometimes you just need, you want to support your local industry. But there's also the question of the customs now. I understand a few things are going on, I think, in the National Assembly with the reviews of the tax policies and all the reforms coming in from Taiwo Yedele's committee. Do you think that with the way customs approach things, it is really right for us to take revenue collection from customs and just leave them to promote trade?
Well, that's sincerely, that's a tough one. There may be certain things you and I aren't aware of, which has driven government to wanting to take that decision. There's no doubt about it. We do have collection problems because there are leakages. And so there are collection and accounting problems. Now, it's also important to understand that some agencies, by their very nature and their mandate, are either revenue generating or revenue collection agencies. If we're changing that structure, and I'm never one to say no to a change, but it's important that we implement such changes carefully and see whether it works well or it achieves the process it's supposed to achieve. If it doesn't, then we need to be very careful. So if you're going to move the entire structure of revenue collection for the Federation to one particular government agency, that may be a bit too much to start with. Perhaps it's important to test and to see if this is possible. We're all witnesses to what happened with IPIS and how some agencies at the end of the day rejected it and the problems engaged with it. So when you want to migrate to a new system, you need to test that system and make sure it works. Like I said, there may be things that we're not aware of at this stage that has informed this decision by the government, but then let's see how and what happens with it.
All right. So in still looking at solutions, because the price of commodities is not going down anytime soon, and we know that that is also hinged on the pump price of petrol. One wonders if this is the time to take a second look at perhaps the invocation of the Price Control Act. But of course, there's also some contention in that regard about how we operate a competitive environment. But really, is that an option that is worth considering in the light of the circumstances that we find ourselves in, where people are unable to feed? I'm bringing that question to you now, Chief Elochukwu.
Well, first and foremost, I can talk about the exchange rate for whatever it stands. There are things that no country, no sane country allows to go the way of being determined by the market forces. Since 19 what that I knew in Hong Kong, their exchange rate has never gone beyond 7 point something to $1. And it has always been so because these are things that will affect the prices of every other thing. Now, when we talk about the pump price of petrol, I would assume that those in government or those who advise the government should know the sensitivity of such things, that anything that affects the transport sector almost creates a spiral effect on the prices of other things. And some of us cannot understand this whole thing about allowing the market forces determine certain things, because some people who had opposed the issue of subsidy, I, for one, have said that oil or crude is produced in Nigeria, and there is nothing that would be justifiable to say that Nigerians can't enjoy subsidy on petroleum products. I don't know that logic. However, the way it has gone really out of hand. And I think that the government should be able to do something, remove certain things from the market force control in order to create a stable society. Because when the population of those who can afford to live gets out of hand, it may not really augur well for the peace of the country. That is what I think. Something must be done. The issue, many things are shrouded in certain level of secrecy. For instance, we were told about the Dangote refinery, the products that comes there. We now have NNPC will determine the price and all that. So there's a whole lot of things that are not clear because too complicated. And we think that certain things should not be unnecessarily complicated. We should be thinking about how Nigerians will be comfortable, reasonably comfortable, so that we can build a nation. But if we are talking about controlled Nigerians, I don't think that's the right way would be. That's my own view, though.
All right, Mr. Adebayo, let me bring some of the concerns raised, because the whole idea of zero import duties, because of where we are as a people, when those two-in policy, they are quite brutal policy. The government admits that at the end of the day, that is affecting literally everything, especially the exchange rate. The argument of the government was that when they came in, things like defending the naira in the FX market was costing the government about 6 or 7 trillion. They had another 5-point-something trillion using for fuel or PMS subsidy. There's another 2 trillion, say, for electricity subsidy, and we had some backlog. So if you put it together, we had some 21 or so billion revenue forgone, and then the recklessness of the previous administration with ways and means that racked up our numbers. Base money supply was out of control, and we landed in this situation. So for us not to fall off the cliff, it's like we had to do this as quickly as possible. But the argument is always the fact that, did we think this through? Because it looks like we're overexposed. Given what is going on, do you think we should rethink the policy, Mr. Adebayo?
Well, I'd say this. First of all, in some Asian countries, they've actually attempted a zero import duty program, and it has worked in some countries. And I think it's from that experience that we're able to come out and see what the problems will be if we do not implement it very well. I'd said one thing earlier about having a very strong interministerial committee directly involved with this. But again, we need to be able to consider more than anything else the long-term strategy. Is there a long-term strategy for food security? And then does this short-term program fit into the long-term policy? Do we stop it after 180 days? And then everybody says, oh, that was too short, we need to have it back. What exactly is the outcome expected from this program? And how will that fit into something else that's longer term for the entire country and which everyone will benefit from? I'm not sure that has been thought through yet. So for me, it's time to rethink. The headline is okay, zero duty import, but we need to rethink how it will be implemented, who the players and actors along the supply chain will be, and how to effectively get them to understand what roles they will play. And more than anything else, the monitoring and evaluation of the program is key. We must know where it fails, if it's failing, and where it's successful, if it's successful.
Mr. Adebayo, just 1 second, just to add to that, just maybe my question was the twin policy. PMS, floating the naira, people feeling that we're now overexposed. Should we rethink that as well, especially the FX market?
No, it's pretty tough to go back on that. We've gone too far down the road. The best we can do is to adjust. PMS prices are where they are. And with the local refining capacity we have right now, I expect that there will be adjustments made. But we cannot get it back to the levels it was last year. The same thing with food prices as they were with costs of a lot of things. And we all know what's driving this. The exchange rate is where it is. I had hoped that there would be some degree of targeting for the exchange rate, and that target would be somewhere lower than where we have it now. But unfortunately, that's not the case. And we're starting to adjust to living at 1,500 naira minimum to $1 environment. We will start to make plans to adjust. It's going to be tough. Some of us were pretty much around when the second-tier foreign exchange market started. And it was crazy for the naira to go up from 4 naira to 12 naira, you know, but then adjustments were made. I think those things are here to stay. I don't like the toughness, but, you know, I have to adjust. Thanks.
Yeah, pardon me, we're fast running out of time. Let me bring this to you now, Chief Elochukwu, for your final words. But in giving us your final words, I'd like you to also respond to that concern about high import tariff and the dissonance with, you know, the evidently absent backward integration at home. But Perhaps you could also give us your own perspective. Do you see any support, for local industries, either it's the manufacturing of, electric appliances or even local assembling of vehicle plants, to make up for the high import tariff that we see in that space?
Well, I think, if I want to say it the way I see it, the fact that all through history there has been collections, even taxes, based on what is supposed to develop the local vehicle manufacturing. But then we haven't seen any such thing because we don't even know how those resources were applied. But then as to what is happening right now, there is a question that was asked whether there is need for tweaking on all this other area. And I will say that there is a need, and very urgent need. Mm-hmm. The pragmatism of any venture is always about the plan B. In other words, that there is something that is to be done. Yes, it's conceived. But then there should also be a thought that what if this one that is doesn't, what do we do? So the plan B appears to be missing in all that the government is doing or has been doing.
And we hope that gives them, serious food for thought today. I would like to thank you very much, gentlemen, for your time on the program. We've been speaking with Mr. Adegboyega Adebajo, economist and structured finance advisor. Also joining us today for this subject is Chief Ernest Elochukwu, who is the CEO, Nestello Group, Freight Forwarders, and also former National President, Association of Nigeria Licensed Customs. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for coming on the program. And we must apologize for not bringing you the last leg of our conversation, which is an update on minimum wage implementation. We'll try to return it sometime during the week. But this is where we anchor at this point. And thank you so much for joining us on the show today. We'll be back again tomorrow. I am Bwala Koka.
Thank you for your company. I'm Jeffrey Ozama. Bye-bye.